Okay, we're going to present the argument now against allowing the news industry to be structured the way it is right now. And we're not talking about commentators and we're not talking about investigative journalists. We're talking about the people that deliver the daily news. You know, they're sometimes referred to in the industry as the hard news reporters that tell you the current occurrences, what happened today. And a long time ago, we had to decide how we were going to structure this, what we're going to do. And what we didn't want to turn it over to the government because then whoever's in power is just going to take over the place. And so what we did is we turned this duty over to the advertising agencies. And we figure that way, they'd be able to disseminate the news to all the people in our population, and it would be paid for by the ad revenue that the advertising companies would get from advertisements, and so that's the way we structured it. And in the beginning, there's no problem with that, because if you go way back to the beginning of television, there's maybe like 3 channels or something, so there's no problem, there's no competition. But as we move forward in time, there gets to be a whole lot of competition for all of these network news type people. And the question is, what happens here? What happens is that the advertisers turn to the advertising agencies and they say, we're not going to pay you for anything that we don't receive. In other words, we are going to pay you by how many eyeballs and ears you get to see our advertisement, and we're not going to pay any more than that. And we have very good ways of going about watching this and making sure that we only pay for what we get. This presents a really big problem for the network news channels. And the reason why is because there are many more places that people's eyeballs and ears can go to. And so, here's the way the problem manifests itself. Now, suppose you're one of these big advertising companies and the guys next to you are just eating your lunch. They're killing you in the ratings and you're losing money like crazy. I mean, you start worrying, you could go out of business. And so what you need to do is you need to solve this problem somehow. And so what you do is you bring in consultants and you say to the consultant, listen, I have to get my viewership up for my news shows. I've got to do it. If I don't do it, we're facing a whole lot of real serious trouble. So what do I do? How can I solve the problem? So the guy that's the expert says, well, you're not going to like this, but I'll tell you what the story is. Suppose you go up to a bus stop and there's a guy standing there at the bus stop. You go up to and stand on his right-hand side and you stomp on his foot. And I guarantee you'll get his attention every single time. So what does that mean as far as, the news business is concerned? What it means is you have to be able to figure out what the average individual in the United States believes in. And their values are, generally speaking, conservative. They like strong defense, they like small government, all this kind of stuff. It's not difficult to figure out. So what you have to do is you have to say exactly the opposite of that. So when you go to present a news story, you want to be able to present it in a way where you believe in big government and all of the opposite things that the conservatives believe in. And what this is going to do is this is going to get your average person in the United States really angry. I mean, the greatest thing that you can do is this guy jumps up out of his sofa and he says, oh my God, call Uncle Joe, call Aunt Mary, tell him to turn their television set on. Did you see what that guy just said? Did you see that? So it solves your problem. And so therefore, as a news service, that's what you're going to do. That's the direction you drift in. And you become pretty much just like the people in Hollywood. You're in the business of telling a shocking story that's based very, very loosely on current events, which you will call news. And nobody can dispute it because, the other guys are doing the same thing you are. And so that's the really unfortunate state of affairs right now for hard news in the United States. There are solutions, but, it's going to be really hard to get, advertising companies to change their way of doing business. This is a really tragic situation because being able to deliver the news of the world to our citizens is probably one of the most important things in our entire society. It's the foundation upon which our entire democracy is built. And, the advertising agencies that we have, entrusted to be able to do this just simply don't do it, and it's really unfortunate, You ask them about it. And here's the thing to think about. Suppose that you had to go into a hospital and have surgery. Wouldn't you like to know that those people that are going to be cutting you open and everything have been graded on what they're about ready to do to you? I certainly would. Suppose somebody's going to build a big apartment building and you're going to live up there on one of the floors. Wouldn't you like to know that that engineer knows what he's doing? He's been graded and, he's able to do the job. But there's no such thing in the news business. And they refuse to police themselves. They refuse to have any kind of, standards where they can prove to the public that they are doing the job that we've entrusted them to do. Then, when you turn around to them and say, oh, well, how can we do that? There's no way to do it. Well, there's lots of ways to do it. I mean, you can, let's look at it this way. Let's pick one particular topic, which is politics, because that's real hot. But you can have other topics too, such as science and things. But, let's take politics. And let's say that you walked into a room. And in the room, there's a Democrat, and there's a Republican, and there's a hard news journalist, and there's a 10-year-old girl. And so you walked in and you look at the little girl and you say, little girl, what's going to happen here is that this journalist here is going to present a news story, and he's going to be fair and impartial, and both the Republicans and the Democrats are going to agree that he at least presented their side of the story correctly. And, the problem that we have, little girl, is that we can't figure out how we would go about making sure that this guy is doing his job correctly. And do you know how we could do that? And the little girl would look at you like you're crazy, and she'd say, what are you talking about? They're standing right there. Just ask them, So there's lots of ways of doing this. I mean, what you could do is you could have once a month, at the beginning of the month, you grade, say, the top 50 news sources, beginning with the wire service. And then everybody that delivers the hard news to the public will put their score up there, a nice big bold score so you can see it, and a short internet address that people can go to see why they were graded the way they were graded by the people that graded them, like the Democrats and the Republicans. And then once a month, you have a chance to improve your score and do better than you did last time. There's something like that that could be done. And the real tragic thing right now is that nobody's interested in doing it. And, so therefore we just suffer with what we have. But that would be job number one for a real news journalist. Okay, so the bottom line in all this is that the news is not the news. It cannot possibly be the news. It's because the people that deliver the news to you are not paid to be news journalists. What they're paid is they're paid the same way Hollywood actors are paid. They're paid to tell shocking stories based very loosely on current events, which they call news, and they're paid by how many eyeballs and ears that they get. And the advertising companies that are running the show are not interested in doing anything to change that. And it's really unfortunate, I mean, here's the two guys, one a Democrat and one a Republican, that were, in head of the Senate or the House. And, you can hear them saying the same thing here. Here, play it.
Yeah. That's right. But majority leader, Democrat, majority leader, Republican.
Yes, sir.
That's part of it. Part of it is the media has changed a lot. It used to be the media was the referee. Now they're the participants.
The media, to me, wants to decide who's going.
Exactly.
And I truly believe that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no question.
Well, there it is, and that's exactly what we've been talking about. It's really fundamental to our democracy that we find some way to be able to have news journalists come into existence. We find some way in which news journalists can, survive in mass media news. And if you look back, even way back in John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, remember, democracy never lasts long, it soon murders itself. And Jefferson had an even better one. The end of democracy and the defeat of the American Revolution will occur when government falls into the hands of lending institutions and moneyed in corporations, which is exactly what the advertising agencies are. It's really unfortunate, you know. Here's Socrates. Strong minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Weak minds discuss people. That pretty much sums up what our news service is now. It's unfortunate. That's the way it is. Really would be great if we could change it. Okay, this is the argument in favor of keeping the press the way it is right now. You know, we heard the arguments that were just made against the press, and you know, a lot of them are true. You know, I don't care. You can say most of them, even if you can say they're all true. You still want to think long and hard before you change anything that we have. You know, I mean, I know what you're saying. What you're saying is you know, is the press liberal? Yeah, you know, do birds fly? Yeah. Why? Because they got wings. They were built that way. The press is built to be you know, liberal. That's all there is to it. The question is that a bad thing? You know. I mean, I understand the arguments that you have. You know, what you're saying is that you know, the way things are right now, the press being liberal is going to be attacking all of the conservative thoughts. You know, it's undermining our democracy. And it's making it so that we can't really, you know, discuss news subjects in any kind of intelligent way because it's biased. But let's think about that for a minute. If you go back to the beginning of our country, when we revolted against the King of England, we decided we didn't want to be ruled by kings and queens and, you know, any kind of like dictatorship or anything. We wanted to have a very small, centralized government. And all of the things that we do in our society, like all the different services and everything, were going to be provided primarily by private firms, you know. And, you know, they would supply whatever it is that the public wants. The public would buy it. They would get money. And, you know, that's the way it works. You know, if you think about news is one of those products. And so you have to be delivering to the people what it is they want. I mean, if you just think about it for a minute, you know, you want to have lots and lots of, you want to have everybody reading the news. You want to have an informed public is what you want. And, you know, that means that you're also going to have an enormous number of reporters. And all these guys cost money. They're not for free. And so you have to be able to create stories that these people want. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to have a business. They're simply not going to listen to you. I mean, they won't buy your product. You'll be out of business. Okay, so now let's talk about how we're going to make a living as a news organization. Because if we can't make a living, there's no news organization. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that people respond to? What do they want? Well, you know, we're talking about news, and there's a primordial feeling that people have that go all the way back to God knows when, hundreds of thousands of years. News is the latest thing that's happening. If it was a zillion years ago, it'd be the smells in the air, or whether or not you see a saber-toothed tiger or something, you know. And so what it comes down to is a pretty good little description here, you know. Is the media negative? Media studies show that bad news far outweighs the good news by as much as 17 negative news reports for every one good news. Why? The answer, humans seek out news of dramatic negative events. These experts say that our brains evolved in a hunter-gatherer environment where anything novel or dramatic had to be attended to immediately for survival. So while we no longer defend ourselves against saber-toothed tigers, our brains have not caught up to it. They argue that news appeals to our mind's quest for survival relevant information, but it doesn't necessarily meet that need. It squanders your attention on generalized threat signals that you really can't act on. So that's just the way the world works, you know. You know, our conservative nature is like, you know, comfort zone, and this is like, you know, the way we like our world to work, you know. But that's not what people respond to as far as news is concerned. They want what happens outside your your comfort zone. They want the challenge. That's what they're looking for. Your comfort zone, and here's where the magic happens. They want to push boundaries. They want to go where no people have gone before. Or they want to break the limitations that there are. That's the general feeling of the public. Is that if you want to get the maximum response, then you've got to give people a more liberal point of view of the world. That's what they're looking for. Okay, so what it comes down to is this. Is the press liberal? Yes. Is there a place for real news journalists to exist in mass media news? No. Is there Santa Claus? No. I mean, this is just the reality. This is the way the world works. You're a big girl now, you're a big boy now. You're able to figure out you have to be able to figure out what's real and what's not. You turn on your television tonight, there's going to be all kinds of people telling you how to make $1 million here and $1 million there. Do you believe that? Hopefully not. And when you listen to your newscast, you just have to be able to put your filter on and kind of understand what's going on. They have to make a living, and this is the way they make their living. And if they were all very conservative and everything, it would be boring. You would, probably go bankrupt, So, that's just the way the world is today, and you need to accept it. And, it's not good or it's not bad. It just is what it is.